I remember doing that a couple of times. Coach saying, knock it off. What are you doing? You got to cool it.
What does it look like to lead with empathy while still making clear strategic decisions? And why does that balance feel so difficult at times? In my upcoming conversation with Jessica Linthorne, President and CEO of the Nuclear Innovation Institute, we explore that question through the experiences that shaped how she leads today. Jessica's story brings that tension into focus through her moments that required her to understand herself, the people around her, and the weight of the decisions in front of her. Through her story, it becomes clear that strong leadership isn't about removing emotion, it's about learning how to manage it. Emotion brings awareness and connection. Strategy brings clarity and direction. The ability to separate the two and choose how to respond is what allows someone to lead with intention. Join me as I split atoms with Jessica Linthorne.
Jess, welcome to the Splitting Atoms podcast studio. I'm so excited you're here. I've been looking forward to this all week. I know the value that I get from any conversation that you and I have ever had is going to be the same value that our audience is going to walk away with from today's discussion. So I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for taking the time. Before we jump into the heart of our conversation, could you give a brief 60-second rundown of the Nuclear Innovation Institute for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. Caitlin, thanks so much for having me. I do want to start with that. I mean, any opportunity to talk about what we do at the Nuclear Innovation Institute, but just talk about the sector broadly, and of course the passion that our team has. I'm just truly grateful, so thanks for that. So Nuclear Innovation Institute, we're a member-based, not-for-profit organization, and really with the core mandate of sector transformation, so representing our founding members, which includes Bruce Power, BWXT, Cameco, Can-Do Energy, ES Fox, and Kinetrix, working close with those founding members on transformation projects. So how do we save time and money and enhance safety within the nuclear sector, but also looking towards as an industry voice, so lots of advocacy work, working with all levels of government, supporting our community, and really bringing that awareness of nuclear to the forefront. So really excited about the work we get to do every day.
Amazing. And I can't remember exactly when, but we have known each other now for several years. One of the things I've always admired about you, and I think that a lot of people do, is the way you carry yourself, regardless of the situation, whether it's a one-on-one meeting, at a networking event, or if you're up on stage. You always come across as someone who's very confident, very capable, yet you make space for others in such a welcoming and warm way. And I have always appreciated that. But being comfortable in your own skin like that is not something that comes naturally to some, maybe more naturally to others. But regardless, all of us have to work on those skills. It's just something that we're honing. So my question for you, Jess, is do you have any early memories of when you started developing those skills and working on them, on the confidence and the comfort?
Mm-hmm. That's a big early question, but no, I appreciate that. And thank you for those kind comments too, because I think that, all of us as humans, well, first of all, we're always all on a journey, right? We're moving through this life that is a journey constantly, and things change and there's ebbs and flows, whether in your career or your personal life. And you and I both know that, and we have those experiences. And when I reflect on, my own confidence or my ability to show up, I am very committed to being present, and I think that helps. So I am here with you today. I often say, be where your feet are, and my feet are here with you, and I am here, and I'm present in this conversation. And when I amplify that, presence throughout my life, it allows me to be a wonderful parent at home and present with my children and really fulfilled with my family, but also allows me to be very present when I'm at work with my colleagues, with my board of directors, and that being present allows me to make good decisions, to move things forward, to have confidence, and certainly also just to be surrounded by incredible energy and incredible people. So, I guess, kind of to take a step back to your question on early memories, I do have a very early childhood memory with my dad, I have to tell you, and you'll appreciate this story. I've never told you this before. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I was can you imagine, I was in a drama club, right? So I was in this drama club with the YMCA, and we were putting on a play, and it was like, I don't know, it was like a courtroom, right? So I think I was like the defense lawyer. Like I had this role that I had to fulfill. But in my script, and so remember, I'm 8 years old, we'll say. In my script, I had to say specifically. So I just say the word specifically, and I couldn't say it. And I tried and I couldn't say it, it would come out Pacific, right? Or whatever. And so it's this little kid and I'm trying to say specific. And I remember being in the car with my dad and I said, I can't say this word and I'm so nervous and I'm going to screw it up and it's going to be so embarrassing. And he said, Jess, why don't you say in particular? And I went, oh, but that's not the line. He said, yeah, but if you can say in particular instead of specifically, you're saying the same thing. You're using words that work for you. And so I have this early memory and I sometimes reflect on, I'm doing what I need to do, but I'm doing it in a way that works for me. And in the context of today, we do lots of good work and we do it in a way that works for our founding members. We do it in a way that we can execute it and it makes sense and it allows you to kind of have a little bit of rise, have that confidence. So it's the little workarounds that we discover and it was just sort of an interesting reflection on, how to make something work for me because I couldn't say specific. I can today.
Yeah, you've nailed it now. Yeah. Every single time. Not once did you fumble. It's so funny. Just when you mentioned being in the car with your dad, it brought me back to when I was going into preschool, I could not say my R's. I would say hamburger. And my dad, it felt like a year. It was probably a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And so every day on the way to preschool, I would practice saying my R's like a pirate, like really R. And we would stop because I was doing such a fantastic job at the convenience store right by my preschool. And I would get a kindred egg surprise thing.
Yeah.
And there was a lovely woman that worked at the store named Hazel, and she gave them to me every day. And it wasn't until I was older, almost adulthood probably, where my dad said, Caitlin, I was buying you those eggs. I thought I was doing such a good job that Hazel, I was correcting my speech impediment. Yeah. I thought Hazel was just so impressed that
sweet.
She gave me. It took me a long time until my dad said, no, wait a minute. So it's a wonderful reframe in terms of, we're not going to be great at everything.
That's right.
But can you find a way that you're great at it in your own way and being comfortable with that?
Yeah.
So it's just that shift. We don't always have to show up how others expect us to or what's the norm. Mm-hmm. We can show up in our own way and still completely be capable in that space.
Absolutely.
I like that story.
Yeah, thank you.
We also share a similarity, not just car rides with our dads. You and I both grew up in competitive environments.
Yes.
Me showing horses and you on the ball diamonds playing baseball.
Yes.
So being on a team sport, playing competitively, being in that environment, what are some of the lessons that you started learning early on that have stayed with you through your career and your personal and professional life now?
Yeah. No, this is great. And I love the opportunity to reflect on, how we have become the people we are. When I think about sports, competitive sports, the first word that comes to mind is discipline. I do carry that discipline into my life today. I have discipline for myself and my fitness and my mental health and my well-being. I have discipline with work. I have discipline on executing projects and getting things done. I have discipline in following up with people when times are tough and having difficult conversations. So the discipline that I learned throughout, an athletic career, we'll call it, as a teenager, that stays with me. And the other thing when I reflect on baseball in particular, the team sport, the leadership requirement, the strategizing in particular, it's like, okay, well, if this person steals this base, what if we do this or how do we play that? But the ability to communicate together with with your colleagues, with your teammates, which translates into our colleagues today. We strategize, we consider risks. What happens if that person steals home? Okay, well, this is how we'll respond. And today it's risks of what happens if that project runs over budget. Well, we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So, let's mitigate risk. So it's, when I think about, in particular, baseball, I think strategy, I think discipline, I think teamwork. And you put all those things together, it's pretty significant to bring those skills forward today.
I love that piece about the strategic thinking because you are someone I know, and I don't want to say it's rare. There are strategic thinkers, but I think people who think at your level and have the depth of not only long-term strategy and short-term how we get there, but the execution side carries through with you and how you lead your team. And it's so important. Same thing with me. My partner was a horse. So learning those early lessons of how do you advocate for and communicate with and really keep safe and excel with an animal that can't tell you what's going through its head or if it's woken up on the wrong side of the bed, the wrong side of the stall, I should say. And so it's so important to me, the things we do outside of work and those lessons that we're learning early on and throughout our lives that can carry us carry into our careers with us.
Yep.
So that's incredible. So with all of that, has there been a time maybe later as you stepped into your career and were developing earlier on where all of those lessons that you're starting to learn have been challenged? The teamwork, the capability, the confidence, strategic thinking, balancing mental resilience, which would have been another thing in sports. Is there a time that you can really think of all of those things came to a head and were very much challenged?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, we move through our lives and our careers with bumps and hiccups. And, you think you've got a plan and it's not the plan, right? There's something else on the other side that you don't know yet. And so it's, I guess, I want to take one step back. I remember being a teenager, maybe preteen. I remember striking out and throwing my bat. I remember reacting.
Letting that anger rise to the surface.
You just like losing my mind, right? I was passionate. I was mad. I was, you're mad at yourself because like, why'd you swing at that? Whatever the case may be. I remember doing that a couple of times. Then I remember a coach saying, knock it off. What are you doing? Yep. Understood. Right. I remember my parents going, you got to cool it. And I get that. So I set that context because there's reacting and there's responding. And throughout our careers, we develop as people. We become more emotionally aware. We know what's appropriate at work. I can't throw my helmet at the office, right? Like that's not appropriate.
You could try.
You're
lucky.
Well.
For me, if I took it too far, I just got bucked off, right? My partner could quite literally put me in my place physically.
That's right. That's right. So there's reacting and there's responding. And so when I think about, and I will share a personal, a professional story about when I worked with Research in Motion, so now BlackBerry. I was part of that first round of layoffs, and that was in 2011. And I remember it was in 2011 because I was 5 months pregnant with my second son. So he was born a few months later. And I was laid off and I was pregnant and it stung. Anyone that's been laid off or terminated from a job, like these are business decisions that happen to protect the employer. But it hurts the person and it hurts the employer too. I think about the director that was on the other side of the table telling me the news. Like he didn't love that either, right? I empathize with him. I empathize with the company. But again, in that period of reacting or responding, having the mindfulness to take it and respond. And that doesn't mean that I didn't cry on the drive home, right? But it does mean that I nodded. I passed over my BlackBerry. I passed over notes of a program I was developing for their tablet. I think it was called the Playbook, if I remember correctly. BlackBerry had a tablet that I was developing this program on how do we lend these to schools to help students engage with this technology. And I remember at the time just giving it all to Dave Jaworski, who was my director at the time. I gave it all to Dave J. and I said, okay, here you go. And I left.
Did you have to do that? Like, all of those notes in that program and everything, was that something that had already been in development or? I
mean, I had to certainly, your laptop and the property for sure. Here's your property. But I mean, that was also just in my bag. It was something I was working on. So that's a good question and a good point. It was a deliberate, hey, here you go. It doesn't serve me, so have it. And so, yeah, I mean, I do reflect on how we behave. And I'm sure there were some people that day that were given that news and maybe they didn't react that way. Maybe they stood up and stormed out. And I appreciate the emotions that arise in us when, something is dropped on us or when there's bad news. So I think, again, I reflect on the ability to respond versus react. And if I could tell, 10-year-old Jessica that, I don't know if she'd listen yet. I don't even know if 20-year-old Jessica would have listened, right? Like this is a skill that I've honed in throughout my career. And I'm very, very mindful. But it doesn't mean that it's easy. It takes discipline. Hey, perfect, right? It ties back to that discipline. It ties back to that, what's my long-term goal here? What's the win if I flip a table in a meeting? Who's going to win on that? So how do I think about this and how do I respond appropriately? And these are things that we hone and we specialize throughout our careers. And again, it's just this merriment of or this marriage of being mindful and present and being very professional.
And it's so hard to do. I think, as you've said, all of us have had to deal with situations like that. The real superpower, I think, starts coming in when you can understand that, yes, the emotions are real, they're valid, you are going to cry on the way home. But the response has to be, how do I deal with those emotions in a way that does not hurt my long-term goals?
Oh, for sure.
My long-term strategy.
Yep.
I think so many people have left situations, myself included, where we were so angry and upset and we maybe took it more personally than it was meant to be, that we have responded in a way that in hindsight we think, I wish I would have left with a little more poise, or maybe not bad talked someone in that way, because that is what we want to do based on our emotional reaction. But then you have to balance that with responding and taking action that aligns with your long-term goal and strategy. And those two things can look very different.
Yeah.
So was there a moment for that in it with you in leaving BlackBerry, doing it with Grace, handing over your notes, where it came full circle, where you were thankful you responded in that way, as opposed to, flipping them off and saying, I'm going to try to. The reason I asked about the program is we've talked about that in the past a little bit, and I don't think it was fully developed yet, right? It was just you kind of chicken scratch
just a few ideas,
notes. So they would not have known if that had left with you. And a lot of people in that situation, they do try to find ways to, just out of resentment, not hand that off.
Yeah.
And you did. You chose, because I think probably knowing you, it was because you knew the purpose behind those notes was something you really believed in.
Yeah.
But doing that, was there a moment later that you came face to face with, I made the right choice?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure. Actually, very, very obvious. So I mentioned Dave Jaworski. So he was our director, and this was going back lots of years. So I can't remember his full title, but it was this kind of corporate affairs, community relations was under that umbrella. I was with the philanthropy team. And so this group of really talented people that I stay in touch with lots of them, but just brilliant people. And later on, and I won't guess the year, but later on, Dave Jaworski ran for mayor and became the mayor of the city of Waterloo. And I was working in the municipal sector. And this is, I go back to everything does work out the way it's supposed to, right? So I was laid off from BlackBerry. It gave my family time to move back to Bruce Grey region, to connect with our family. I accepted a position with the town of Saugeen Shores, where I worked there for 10 years before coming into nuclear. And while I was with the municipality of Saugeen Shores, I attended a conference, and Dave Jaworski was there. And I had heard, kind of through LinkedIn that he was the mayor, didn't really piece it together. But we came, face to face, had a big smile and a big hug. And, we both acknowledge, hey, things work out the way they're supposed to. And the shift for me from the, the tearful ride home to being in the municipal sector, and the growth of my family along the way. But I really enjoyed my time with the municipality, and public sector will always have a spot in my heart. I really enjoyed it, and I feel passionately about developing the community, working collaboratively, working with our elected officials. And so, it was just such a special time to see Dave and to reconnect. But also just to reflect on the fact that, I stepped into something that was meant to be for me. So these things happen, and they're hiccups. It's not the end of the world. We can all get through these things together.
Things do turn out the way, I know we both believe that, things turn out the way they're supposed to be.
Yep.
Imagine how differently that moment would have been coming face to face with him again.
Oh,
if you had left that situation with slamming the door.
Oh, it would have been embarrassing.
And we've all had those awkward moments. Yep. It's not to belittle that those moments happen to all of us. But how lovely that because you left with grace, you left with empathy, also trying to understand their perspective, not just letting the anger and the resentment lead. That moment was something that you could step into and be happy about, not awkward about.
Yeah, for sure. And how embarrassing it would be to react poorly in a time that he didn't want to be sitting on that side of the table. The HR woman didn't want to be, I'm sure this was not their favorite day. It's not a favorite day when you have to move employees along and make cuts. And I know that, right now, budget season for lots of municipalities, I'm seeing lots of things in the news about positions being eliminated and things changing and moving. The economy is different, right? The economy changes. And that period of time for BlackBerry, that was really difficult. It was difficult for the city of Waterloo. It was difficult for this region of Waterloo. It was a difficult time for the tech sector. And I empathize greatly. And yes, I was a casualty of that period of time, but so were lots of people, and lots of people were impacted. So yes, I think, again, we go back to that ability to respond, to manage, both sides of it, because, Caitlin, you and I talked about how, if feelings are valid, emotions are valid, and acknowledging that is valid. And it's, we are humans. We will be angry. We will be frustrated. We'll be sad. We'll grieve, especially if it's a job or a team we loved. And how do we move forward from that? And thinking forward and having that discipline, exercising that ability to manage reaction it's critical for all of our success.
Yeah, because it's never about removing the emotion.
No.
Because emotion can also make us superb leaders and superb teammates and colleagues and all of those things.
Yeah.
It's about balancing it with, am I acting out of emotion, or am I acting out of strategy and letting emotion be a guide on how I feel and what I need in this situation? What is one of your pieces of advice, or what has helped you acknowledge that emotion but keep it where it needs to be? Is there a friend group you turn to? Is it knowing where to release it and when to let professionalism lead more than that emotion?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I know that we have networks of people, outside of work, that social connection is really important. It's important to have that friend you can call. It's important to have, those relationships outside of work. It's important to find healthy ways to manage our feelings or our mental health or well-being. And I run. I know you run too. And I don't know your reason for running, but my reason for running is it's meditative. It clears my head. I go to the gym. I put in earbuds. I don't really want to talk to anybody. I want to do my own thing because that's how I clear my mind. And that discipline of getting up at 6 a.m. and going to the gym or going for that run, that 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., that is my hour and nobody else's. And it's magical for me. It sets my day on the right track. It sets my week in the right direction. It allows me to process, maybe some of those frustrating feelings, those things that arise. And if I can just go for a long run and hammer it out, I come home a new woman. I come home very present. I show up to work very present. And so for me, it's fitness. I think fitness is a bit of the secret sauce for me and my well-being.
It's funny, I run because it's one more way I can spend money with Walt Disney World and get merchandise. I just thought, well, how can I spend more money at Disney? I'll just pay them now to run 50 miles over 4 days.
That's wild.
I can't. And I didn't run the whole thing, let me tell you. There's some
You are.
walking and huffing and puffing involved. But it's funny because you are right. Now that I do run, there is so much downtime, especially for someone like myself, who I spend a lot of time working. I have a hard time. We were just talking about sleep and getting out of our heads. And running has become something where it is so quiet for me in terms of no screens. People can't get a hold of me. Where I can just think through. Creativity kind of comes back. And then, of course, the science behind it with just the physical well-being of it and the mental well-being. So you're absolutely true. I love that. We both have very good friends in this industry, and it is so great to have those that you can turn to and really say how you're feeling and let that frustration out, but also allowing that to then just be gone and release it, acknowledge it in the correct place and know that it's safe with them and that they understand it because they also understand the industry or maybe what's happening at that moment, and then turning back and trying to handle yourself in a way that doesn't close doors, that doesn't
That's right.
leave a bad reputation. One of my favorite lessons kind of in leadership and a great way to handle this from 100 years ago is Abraham Lincoln had a really famous set of letters called his never signed, never sealed letters. And this is when he was really angry. He would write a very angry letter and he wouldn't put his name to it and he wouldn't seal it. He would put it in a drawer. And usually by the time it came to seal it and send it, he would have calmed down and really thought on the issue and reframed it. Now, luckily for Lincoln, it was a slower period of time because how many of us have done this in email format?
Yeah.
And you can so quickly send the send button, and we wish we could respond it back. So I very often, when I feel myself starting to be led by emotion, I think of those never signed, never sealed.
That's great.
And I think just put it in the drawer.
Yeah.
Don't put your ink to the paper yet.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful. But it's something that even from the dawn of time, people have struggled with accepting the emotion, getting it out somehow, but not letting it drive our behaviors, which can hurt us ultimately.
Yeah.
So I love that.
That is
part of
great.
it.
That is great. It's, it's no different than the 24-hour rule, right? You think about minor hockey and, any families that have children in sports, they talk about the 24-hour rule and to cool down before you react. And hey, I get it, right? And I think that we all as humans can acknowledge we're humans. It feels easy sometimes to react, but it's okay. You can pause, be present, sit with it, and respond appropriately.
You probably should pause.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
There's lots of times where we should pause. So yeah, no, that's good.
And I love how you extended your empathy not only to your situation and giving yourself the grace, but also to the organization and Dave, who was also in a situation like everyone in that situation. And I think it's hard for us to sometimes remember, even though we have been hurt, it doesn't mean we have to vilify the other side of the table because they're not where they want to be either. As you said, BlackBerry didn't want to be in that position.
Yep.
And that being said, sometimes we do find ourselves in situations where it's not a great environment and there isn't a lot of care going back and forth. So can you walk me through what you have learned, both good and bad, from being in situations with great leaders, maybe not so good leaders? Not asking you to mention any names, of course, but I think there's so much that we can learn even if we're aware and observing our environment, even if we can't change it and it's not where we want to be.
Yep.
There's lessons that we can take to continue to grow in those environments.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm thinking of how to respond to that because it's such a big question. But I firmly believe we grow into our bosses. I do. I think that we model their behavior. No different than we model our parents or the people that surround us, as a child. We model behavior. And I am aware of that. And I currently work for a board of directors at the Nuclear Innovation Institute that I cannot get enough of. I learn so much every day. I learn so much from the people on my board, and I can turn to them. And so I can pop them a text and I can double check on something and I can, send a biweekly email with updates and also add a little comment on the bottom on, maybe something that I'm dealing with or that I'm kind of tied up with. And they respond, right? I have support and I love it. I'm really in a period of my career of just tremendous learning. Now, when I reflect on early career days, I had some bosses that were a bit more standoffish. I had some bosses that couldn't wait to help me grow and learn. I had a boss that was like a micromanager. And I also reflected on that's not something that I want to be like when I grow up. So I've worked for people that I do want to be like when I grow up, and I've worked for people that I go, I didn't love that trait. And it's finding balance and it's being yourself because we're all different, and we will all lead differently, and we will all manage different. And there is that difference too. There's leadership and the opportunity to lead despite your role, and there's the ability to manage when you have direct reports, and you do need to manage. And that's part of the job. So it's that fine line, but picking up traits along the way, I think is really interesting, recognizing that, we model behavior. And if we can be mindful and conscious of the behaviors that we do want to model, what are all the best traits and how do I incorporate those into how I show up for my team? And we talked, a little bit about empathy for BlackBerry as the employer and empathy for the people on the other side of the table. They were just as empathetic for me, recognizing that I was on that side of the table, that I was leaving. And so that shared empathy and having the ability to fold that in to work that we're doing as a consideration. It doesn't mean I'm not going to make hard decisions every day to protect the employer, to protect the organization. I am going to make hard decisions. And that's part of the job. That's part of the job when you're the president and CEO is you do make hard decisions. And that's okay. And the consideration of empathy helps with that. And so how do we do this, with kindness? How do we manage the situation, recognizing that people do have emotions, and how do we support them? And And first and foremost, how do we protect the organization and the employer and the founding members to ensure that we are delivering the mandate we've promised we will deliver?
I think that word kindness that you used, oftentimes people confuse kindness with being nice. To be kind is not always to be nice. To be kind can reflect a variable of ways that you show up for someone that just considers them before you have to act.
It's thoughtful.
Because firing someone is not nice. Giving negative feedback sometimes does not feel nice, but it is kind. It is, if you are direct and you are respectful in how you do it, there is such a difference for me between those two words. You're not always going to be nice. You can't always be nice because you have to protect other interests sometimes. But to be kind in the way you approach the not so nice moments, that is the difference maker to me in forms of leadership and in how environments are curated and lived within.
And if somebody needs that coaching moment, it would be unkind to not give them that moment. And so having the ability to say, this might be a little bit uncomfortable, but I need to address with Caitlin that when she acted this way, it wasn't appropriate. And so because the person with that behavior, it's a blind spot, right? They're called blind spots for a reason. We don't see them. I have blind spots too, right? And I do often say to my colleagues, hey, I need honest feedback on how that discussion went. And they'll say, no, it was good. And I say, guys, I need honest feedback, right? So if it was fine, then that's okay. But please tell me specifically what was okay about that difficult thing, or tell me if I went too far with this particular theme or whatever the case may be. And I seek that too, because blind spots are blind spots. We don't see them. So it is unkind to allow somebody to move down with their blind spots without saying, hey, you know what? If you just approach this a bit differently, you might have a more favorable result. And I think that's a really important part of leadership, but it doesn't mean it's easy, right?
I think it also reflects your style of leadership. There sometimes is this misconception that once you get to CEO level and president level and all of these things, that the learning is done, that you are a complete human in the sense of that role. And it really isn't true.
No.
You still need the feedback. You're still growing and developing. You still have, as you say, blind spots that need to be addressed, pinpointed, worked on. Every leader is not good at everything. And we need to do away with this misconception that once you get to a certain point in your career, you're on this podium and you're untouchable because you're great at everything.
Yeah.
It's simply not true. And so I love the fact that your form of leadership makes space for that because you are a very competent, very capable woman. You have the confidence and the comfort in how you direct and lead. You can make those decisions. But to also say, I know that there are things that I may not be seeing, and that you don't let your ego get in the way of not receiving feedback in a constructive capacity, to me is very impressive. And I will nod to the fact that you have left space for that in your leadership style, because not everyone does, but it serves you as well to make that space for it, to keep getting better.
And we don't know what we don't know, right? It's that simple. So if there's ability to grow and to course correct and to ensure that I'm thoughtful along the way, then I want that. I'm open for that. So, and the other thing, Caitlin, like everybody has a boss. And sometimes, if people look at, presidents and CEOs, whether it's, in our capacity as a not-for-profit where I report to a board, or whether you're a private sector company and you report to share owners, people are reporting to people. There's a structure here. There's a mandate here in any organization, in any president, CEO, any chief operating officer, any of these C-suite executives. People are working towards a mandate and have to balance the protection of their organization and their mandate and the people in which they work with every day. And so it is certainly a delicate balance, but it's exciting too. I'm fortunate. I absolutely love my job.
And with all of this, so some of the lessons that we've just learned, even from going back to your earlier stories about playing ball, about those conversations with your dad, moving through your earlier career, being in good environments, bad environments, balancing highly emotional moments with what do I really want and how do I need to think about this strategically. Now that you are leading a team, leading an organization that really sets the tone in so many ways for our industry and represents so many of I'll call them the major players of our industry.
Yep.
How do you approach your leadership from an operational perspective where you are balancing making sure people feel included, making
Yep.
sure you're getting data points from multiple sources, yet still moving towards the strategy you've put in place and that the board has worked with you to put in place,
Yep.
and making decisions in a way that is swift and takes action,
Yeah.
but balancing it with that human approach that you bring to the job.
Yeah, it's a great question. And years ago, I did, one of those natural abilities sort of tests that you do, right? These professional development things. But this one was specific to leadership. I think it was called Leadership Compass. And so, if you're a north leader, northeast, southwest, so, think about that compass. And there's different, leadership styles. Your north is your warrior. You just go and you get it done. Your east is a little bit more, I'm going to ask you 99 questions and I'm not going to be ready to move forward until you answer 97 of them. Your south is very consultative. So spoiler alert, that's me. I'm a south. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. So very consultative in the approach. And then your west leaders are tons of really awesome big ideas, but maybe not able to execute them, right? So you're really creative and you're going to run with them, but then you get a little bit distracted and then, it's difficult to stay on executing the work. So anyway, I tell you this because it was years ago now. It was probably like 13 years ago I did this
Good memory
thing.
to remember
It
which one is
sticks.
which.
I love it.
You could quiz me right now and I think I may
You could figure it out.
confuse them, but
you could figure it out. But I reflect on that often. So, you do the test and it says, okay, you're south, you're a consultative leader. So what that means, and I do this, and I mean, if my colleagues are listening, they're laughing or, maybe they're rolling their eyes and they're like, yeah, we know. Because what I'll do is I'll come up with a bit of a game plan or a bit of a map, we'll call it. And then I'll go, okay, well, that makes sense to me, but let's go talk to the people on the ground. It's like, hey, have you done this before? What do you like about this? What do you think about this? Or, hey, do you know that person? What do you think, their capability is to help us execute this thing? And then I call someone else and I go, hey, what if we apply for that grant over there? You think we can get that? So I ask all these questions and I gather all this data and then I bring it all back and I go, okay, that makes sense now. And then I make a decision. And I'm making a decision based on what I've learned through some of my consultation. Now, I don't have all day to make lots of decisions, right? So I do it and then I make a decision and I own it, and that's what we're doing. So I keep myself accountable on that. I don't let it go too far. I have my key players though, and my team knows this. And so they know when I call them, it's because I'm like, I got to run this by you. Because I want their opinion. Because we hire professionals and I want their professional opinion. This is my opinion. I think this could work. But if you know it's not going to work, tell me, and then I won't do that. So anyway, that's my consultative style in making
But don't you also
decisions.
find, to me, that just is smart business, because unilateral decisions oftentimes don't reflect the people who are actually doing the work.
Absolutely.
So I'll make a decision based on a process we have. And I'll go to Jessie, who's my right-hand woman, and she very often is the one who's working within that process. And she'll
Yep.
say, we can't do that because of X, Y,
Yep.
and Z. Well, because I'm removed from that part of work, I would have made the wrong decision.
You don't know what you don't know.
Right? Whoever's on the
Yep.
front lines of that work, they should have a say. I remember working somewhere once and the cleaning staff didn't have caution signs, wet floors. And so they were mopping and then having to stand for 20 minutes to wait for the floor to dry for liability reasons.
Yeah.
And it was just the decision because someone had said, well, we don't need that many wet floor signs probably. No one had asked the people working and actually mopping the floors, how many signs do you need? And so they didn't know. So they were wasting so much time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Or sacrificing safety.
Yeah.
And it was just as simple as me one day, who I was a marketing head at that point, saying, why are you standing,
What's going on here?
waiting
Yeah.
around here? Like I love our little visits as you stand by my
Yeah.
office, but why is that? I don't have a wet floor
Isn't
sign.
that something?
They didn't have enough to go around.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what I did the very next day is
Yeah.
I got wet floor signs so
problem
she could
solved.
keep moving on with her day.
Yeah.
I missed the visits as she
Yeah.
waited for the floor to dry, but to me, it is just good business that you check in, not on every
Absolutely.
decision. I'm sure there's a lot of decisions you
Yep.
make that do not require that consultative approach.
sure.
But when it comes to those important decisions or ones that will affect the many,
Yeah.
why not would be my
That's it.
thought. It's just good
That's it.
business.
That's right. And I mean, when I reflect also then, part of that test I was describing, it also gave you results on in periods of stress. So there was like a phase 2, right? So I'm consultative, but in a period of stress or crisis, I become north. I become more warrior,
Interesting.
which I reflect and I go, yeah, that makes sense, right? If there's an emergency or if someone says we got to do this right now, no problem. I'll make the decision and we'll get it done. And again, I come back to that accountability and that ownership in those decisions. So I think that has served me well, but also it's just it's that real reflection on why do I behave the way I behave? Is there a different way to be doing this? How do I address this? How do I also, and I mean, when you are consultative, you are naturally kind of building some buy-in with your colleagues because they're starting to hear that early thought, or what if we do this and what if we do that? It doesn't mean that I always agree with them, right? And that's okay. But at the end of the day, we make a decision. The decision's made, and I have full support with my team. They have got my back. They are a fantastic group of people. And that's why we're executing. We are executing projects. We are executing, tremendous conversations with elected officials at all levels of government. We have a presence in this sector that I am incredibly proud of. And it's because of the people that I get to work with. It's the people business, right? You know that too.
I've never had a bad interaction with any one person on your team. Every time I see anyone on your team, they seem to be just happy people.
Oh,
right. And
good.
I'm sure it's not always like that.
No,
like
of course.
when I've
They're
gone through some
working.
stressful
Yeah.
times with your team where an order might not hit or things like that. But the approach that they take is one where we'll figure this out.
Yep.
Right. We will find a
figure it
way.
out. Yep.
And so I love that about your team. The other point that I think is true for me, and I'd love to know if it's true for you, I don't have a lot of fear in making decisions. I have always operated from this belief that you can always make a new decision. Very few decisions are so final that you can't pivot again. And so I think a lot of leaders, where they sometimes hit pain points, is they take too long to make a decision.
Yeah.
You still have to go and get accurate information, but make the decision, and there's always a new decision that can be made in nearly every scenario. Would you say that's accurate for you? Do you embrace that kind of philosophy?
Yes, I think that there's room for flexibility. I think that as an innovation institute, it's so funny. Maybe it was a year ago, somebody said to me, it just feels like we're always changing. And I said, this is an innovation institute. We are always changing.
You just walk them out to the side and point to the sign?
This is what we do, right? What does innovation mean? It means a change for the better. It means finding that operational. It means getting the wet floor signs. That's what it means. Finding productivity, finding ways to eliminate waste and new process that supports, that efficiency. And so, yeah, there is change, and decisions do need to be made. And I believe in flexibility, and I also believe in having a good business plan and a strategy, right? And
of course,
I have that. We have a 3-year business plan approved by the board. I was very consultative in building that with my colleagues to make sure that it was a business plan that landed with my senior leadership team, with the directors on my team, to make sure that everybody was aligned with what we were going forward with. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody loves every piece of it. And there was some hard questions, but at the end of the day, we made the decision and we're moving forward together. So when you have a clear strategy or a clear business plan and an approved budget, then you go and get it done, right? You execute it. And so I think that's critical for our success, and making decisions that can be flexible. Yeah, and if it's something that we can change down the road, it also opens up, a little bit of it opens the window for some more creativity. So I often will say to my team, like, bring every idea, right? If it's not going to work, we will tell you why it's not going to work. But if it could maybe work, I want to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's learn about it. Because I have also in my career worked for a boss who I said, hey, I have this idea. And I started calling it, like, I think it was Friday Thoughts or Thursday Thoughts. I'd send him an email every Thursday and I go, here's a couple of ideas. And sometimes it was an article I read, or sometimes it was just, what if we did this instead of that? And one day I walked in his office and said, I kind of want to do this. Like, let me tell you about it. Why? I'll tell you why. So I sold it to him and he said, like, how much do you think it's going to cost? I said, I don't know, like $200, right? Like, this is not going to be an expensive thing. And we did it and it went really well. And we won a couple of national awards. And I remember saying to him, hey, if you didn't let me take that risk, we wouldn't have this opportunity to promote the organization and the work that we're doing. And so I reflect on that, and I want my team to say, hey, Jess, I have this idea. And I love it when they do that. And so creativity is one of our core values. So at the NII, we have 4 core values: trust, respect, creativity, and collaboration. And quite frankly, that's how we show up to work every day. That's how we work. That's how we interact with each other. That's what matters most at the Nuclear Innovation Institute. So I'm glad to hear that you have had positive interactions with our team, because they are showing up with those 4 words in mind every single day.
I like that. Ours, we always come to things with curiosity. We never want to lose our curiosity and asking why. And I also love, as someone who works in the branding world, and I spend a lot of time working with clients on building brand into operational decisions and things like that, and HR and all the aspects. I don't think people realize how many decisions can be removed from their day or the days of their team if you have a solid brand. And I'm not talking about visuals. I'm talking about persona paired with a strategy deck.
Yep.
Because those 2 things should tell you the yeses and the nos really quickly, especially easy decisions all the way from what color should we paint the walls or what style of garbage cans should we have to what kind of customers are we talking to? What kind of words do we use when we're speaking outwardly? Yep. So many decisions. Talk about decision fatigue in days like today.
Yeah.
It just eliminates so many of them. If you have those decisions already made, you're guided by,
That's right.
I tell most of my clients, every boardroom you're sitting around or having a conference table talk with, there should be an empty chair that represents your brand and your strategy because they can join in. So I love that you mentioned that you turn to those for guidance so often. They're such useful tools, those packets, if you will. Now, as we wrap up our conversation, I'd love to ask you a question about the industry itself. I think we both are huge fans of the nuclear sector. I love being in this industry. I know you do too. What is one thing that really makes you love this sector and that you think stands out, maybe above some other industries?
I'm going to say the people, and it might sound a little cliche, and I don't mean it to be. It's such a genuine and authentic space, but I reflect on hard times in the sector where we support our peers through loss or through crisis, and these things that might be happening outside of work, but we show up. We show up, and we show up in such a big way. My family experienced a situation about 1.5 years ago, and the industry showed up. And, it was the simple text, "Hey, Jess, I heard this is happening. How are you doing?" I also work in an organization. I talked about the support, right? And the supportive environment where we got through it. My family absolutely got through it, but we got through it because of that, kind of tier 2 support network. And so I reflect on the people. I also think about earlier this week, I attended the Empire Club event that Eric Chassard, Bruce Power, President and CEO, was speaking. And he talked about the people. And I nodded right along. This stuff doesn't happen in silos. It happens because people like our founding members, these top tier suppliers, all the suppliers across the province, are working together towards that common goal of nuclear power, of clean power generation. And we do it collaboratively. We do it, through curiosity. We're creative. And we're structured and we're focused, and the laser focus cannot be understated. It's a real highlight of the team and the people that come together, and the labor unions too. It's the people doing the work. Yes, the suppliers, but it's the labor too, and it's a lot of people. But we are mission driven, and I have never in my career experienced a sector like this, where I walk into the Empire Club and there's probably 400 people, and every few people, it's a wave. Hi, it's a hug. How are you? And I know Caitlin will be attending the Canadian Nuclear Association conference coming up, and it will be no different. It will be friends. It will be discussion. It will be challenge too on how do we get this thing better? How do we move this bigger? How do we get aligned here? But we work hard and we play hard. And I think it's a tremendous place to be, and people show up, and that can't be understated either.
I'm so excited for, I guess it's 2 weeks away now at the time that we're filming this. The Canadian Nuclear Association conference, to me, is one of my favorite times of the year. Like you said, there's so much content and work put into that, and George Christidis does an amazing job, him and his team at the CNA. But I love even going to the Shore Club at the end of the day and, during happy hour where you see everyone and you connect, and it's on that human level. And as you said, it doesn't matter what the situation is, I do feel there are so many people in this industry that if you need them, work or not, they're there for you.
Yes, they are.
Whether it's a phone call. I mean, you and I have had recent phone calls where we got on a call for one thing and it turned into just a personal conversation of, in this situation, you supporting me through something. You didn't have to do that. It was, I think I've apologized to you. I felt so bad because here I am on this call and something had just happened that was such an emotional hit for me. You didn't even think about it. You didn't even blink. We just worked through it as humans, and then we got back to business.
Yep.
And I do agree with you that is rare to find, but it shows up so consistently in our industry. My best friends are in this industry. The people that I turn to celebrate with, to work through bad situations, we really are there for each other when we need to, beyond the work that's being done. And then you think about the actual work that is being done and how we're showing up to kind of combat some of the biggest things facing the world today, right? Like climate scenarios and energy security. So not even getting into that, if we think that highly of the people, that they're our favorite, and you think of what this industry is doing, it speaks so highly of the individuals who are powering this industry.
We are unstoppable. We are unstoppable. And when we worked together, and that was, similar to Eric Chassard's message, we're unstoppable as Canadians, as Ontarians, as the nuclear sector. It's just an incredible time to be in the sector, and we have tons of work ahead of us, tons of work on our plates, but we're unstoppable. We can do this.
So much opportunity for anyone listening who is not in the sector.
Come on in.
This is such a great place to be.
It really is.
It's good to be here.
Yeah.
And it is so great that you were here with me today. Thank you. I hope our audience walks away understanding it really is a superpower if you can pair empathy and understanding yourself and your emotion with balancing the strategic element of that and knowing where you want to go and what the best path forward is to get there. Those two things working together, you will continue to be unstoppable. Thank you, Jess, for being in the studio, and thank you for splitting atoms with me today.
Thanks for having me.